Do you think this is the unraveling of the United Kingdom as it stands? Are we likely to see Northern Ireland, Scotland start to peel away?
Well, I think it is going to be a very long-term unraveling. When you think about two supertankers that are heading towards each other, you know they can't get out of each other's way, but it's going to be quite a while before you actually see metal on metal. That's kind of what we're looking at here. I mean, the Scots have no incentive tomorrow to try to announce a new referendum. In fact, there were some polls this morning that showed that 55 to 42 Scots don't want another referendum right now. But, you know, if it turns out that the UK is not able to get a very strong integration agreement, a Norway-style agreement with the EU over the course of the coming months, years, then the Scots, I think, very clearly are going to then have a referendum. The Scottish National Party will be very strong around that. They'll get it. They'll win it. They'll be out. Northern Ireland, I don't know if we see a referendum, but we see enormous tensions dealing with the land border with Ireland, which now is going to have to be policed in some way, spot checks, things like that. It's going to really create problems between the Catholics and the Protestants and between Northern Ireland and England, especially because at the end of the day, they're the poorest in the UK and they were getting a lot of money from the European Union. That money's not coming anymore. So certainly within the United Kingdom, you have to imagine you're going to see a slow motion implosion over the course of months and years.
Ian, good morning. Who's going to provide leadership in Europe? Is it going to be Angela Merkel? And are people going to back her?
Well, I mean, ish. Angela Merkel is still the strongest leader in Europe. But, you know, before Brexit, it was very clear that Europe wasn't being led very effectively. There was growing populism in all of these countries, not just in the UK. There was growing opposition to Brussels, growing Euroscepticism. That doesn't go away with Brexit. It's actually going to intensify. And while Merkel is the adult in the room, she's pragmatic. She's saying we don't want to punish the UK, you know, sort of just for spite, and we don't want to force them to leave immediately. We should give them some time. It's very clear that the Germans are going to be looking out for Germany's interests and also German political domestic interests. And so ultimately, I don't think that Germany's going to be able to ride roughshod over other countries. The politics for Brexit are negative for the EU process. Greece, the politics were let's keep everybody in, even though it's economically painful. In Brexit, there would be economic benefits for having more integration, but the politics for all of the leaders across the EU is we have to show everyone that this is not a viable outcome for any of them, particularly as you see the electoral process in places like France and Germany and Italy. So Merkel's the leader, she's the adult, but she's not going to be able to get this done.
Do you think those that argue that the UK should be punished will take some heart from the idea that it looks like the Spanish electorate moved towards Rajoy as a result of Brexit?
I think that's a plus in Spain. Let's see what happens in October with the Italian referendum. Let's see what happens with France. I mean, right now we have 38% popular approval for the Front National. I mean, if this was only Spain, it'd be great. But unfortunately, you know, you can't just have one data point. I mean, there's Renzi's in Italy. Shouldn't the rise of Renzi had meant that we should take heart that there wouldn't be a Brexit? No. Unfortunately, it's 28 different countries, and they're all moving in different directions, most of them moving away from integrated Europe. So, I mean, I'm glad that, look, there's so many risks in Europe right now, and you're not going to see all of them hit. It would have been great if we could have avoided the Brexit risk. We avoided the Podemos risk this weekend in Spain. There are many, many more. Some are going to hit, and unfortunately, they're going to hit in the middle of what's going to be a very long and a very costly and painful unwind.
Ian, what happens, therefore, in terms of timing? Because you have France, particularly on the forefront, wanting to get the UK with the process of exiting as quickly as possible. We've got Merkel summoning Hollande and Renzi to Berlin today. She's obviously going to try and get them on the same page about timing. Should it be a slow process? Should we have the caution coming from Merkel? Or is quicker better?
Well, it can only be so slow. We had, Cameron apparently said to his aide yesterday, why should I be left with all the difficult shit? He has no desire to negotiate that himself. So he's not. I think that everyone's going to give them until October when a new prime minister, a new government is in place. But at that point, I think the pressure from the Europeans will be immense. Osborne's idea that you don't actually need to do anything until you have clarity from the Europeans, so maybe you could wait for a year or two, that is going to be unacceptable to all the Europeans, and they will make the Brits pay. The UK will increasingly be irrelevant in EU processes. They won't be allowed in meetings. They'll be an observer. They'll be on the outside. So for everyone that's saying, well, maybe they don't have to have a vote. Maybe they could back into a second referendum. Maybe Parliament won't go. Maybe they could wait on Article 50. That's all beautiful. But the fact is the process has been set in motion. And as the unwind continues, if the Brits are obstreperous or try to walk it back, the Europeans are going to make it harder.
Ian, the flip side of that is that if the Europeans make it harder, their own populations are going to look at them and say, you know what, you politicians are out of touch. This works two ways, and it's a very fine line that these European politicians now need to walk. A sharply negative reaction, a fearful reaction, is only going to tell those that believe that the EU is not working that they are on the right track.
Well, that's true, and it's one of the reasons why the Europeans want this done quickly. Unfortunately, the Brits aren't negotiating against one country, one party. If they were, it'd be easy. You've got East Europeans across the board that look at this process and say, aha, the populists are already in power in countries like Poland and Slovakia and Hungary. And for each of them, they're going to use their cooperation with Merkel as an opportunity to ask for more goodies themselves on things like Schengen and refugees. On issues like economic transfers, on issues around economic nationalization. This is not going to get easier. There's a reason why the Brits voted for Brexit. It's because Europe wasn't working. Even if they had voted Remain, Europe governance was going to look worse over the coming years. And it's not because these European governments can't shoot straight. It's because the structure doesn't allow them to coordinate properly. So you're right. There are going to be incentives that say, damn, it'd be better if we could just work this out with the UK in a nice, civilized fashion. Merkel, first among equals, understands that. But, Merkel, first among equals, wasn't able to resolve the refugee crisis. Look how hard it was to deal with Greece. She wasn't able to keep the UK in. There is no reason to believe that she's going to be more successful in effectively dealing with this unwind. In fact, there's every reason to believe the opposite.